Hello, welcome to Module 4. Module 4 is Automation in Enterprise. Module 4.1, we will be looking at process automation adoption issues. In this module, I will be walking you through with a few information system theories on technology adoption, and we will gradually focus on a relevant model for business process automation adoption, and then we're going to discuss about the patterns of adoption, and finally we're going to conclude this unit by reviewing some of the tips and tricks for automation project proof of concept. All right, let's start then. Okay, so the learning objectives for this modules are number one, we should be able to design strategies to introduce process automation in your organization. So there will be different parameters you will come across in this unit. Then the second objective is to understand key parameters for your first project success. First project is very important. If you have a good, successful project in your first attempt, then chances are that resistance to change and other organizational issues will become easy. And the third objective is we should be able to devise mechanisms to establish an organization-wide practice to scale adoption. Okay, so software adoption. Before we go to automation adoption, we should look at the issues with software adoption. So software adoption is a very important area. It has been the focus of discussion in information system and computer science for a long period of time. Okay, so most software projects don't fail because of the technical issues. Gartner in 1995 ran a survey. It's called the Chaos Survey. That was about 70% failure, and again in 2006 it remained 70%. In 2016, the third Chaos report also shows the software project remains the same. So projects don't fail because of technical issue, but if they fail, that is the common outcome of the three surveys in the last 3 decades. Is improper planning and understanding of the key success factors and stakeholders' expectations. So in this module 4.1, we will see how closely those parameters that we will discuss here are related to this point as well. Current automation process failure rate ranges between 30 to 50% in the latest surveys, and successful adoption requires very deep understanding of best practices on how to introduce process automation in an organization. We as automation experts, apart from our technical capabilities, also get involved acting as an internal consultant and facilitator for organization to handle and deal with change. Now, let's look at these two statistics in our slide. So this is the Economist Intelligence Unit EIU's 2020 data. So 13 possible choices, and the question was the most difficult challenge faced in automating business processes. So if you look at all respondents are quite concerned with data privacy and security issues. Ranges between North America, Europe, and Asia almost the same. Deployment of the technology, again, if you look at this is it's one of an important issue. Lack of relevant talent and skills, another important point. And if you look at Asia, which and Australasia, it's about 43% issues are related to lack of relevant talent and skills to carry out automation projects. And of course, employee resistance is really mentioned as an important aspect, which leads to difficulties in automation project. Another piece of information from the Economist, which was a survey done again in 2021, it states that to what extent do you agree or disagree that automation will replace humans in workforce? So if you look at here that 19 and 35% agrees that automation will replace human in workforce. So 54% believe that automation will replace a human in workforce, and this is a common issue. During our own research work, when we discuss employee concern with different organizations, this issue of automation is going to replace me or it's going to take over my job, it comes quite strongly. It comes quite strongly. Okay, and that leads to, of course, resistance and fears and issues against our process automation endeavors in organizations. All right, so let's jump. There are many information system adoption theories. I'm just listing some of them here, and the one which I highlighted in colors are the one we're going to discuss today. The other, which are currently gray, are also important, but if you're planning to do your further studies, you might like to read those theories as well. But from our purpose, we are looking at the basics one. So the first one is theory of reasoned actions, TRA, diffusion of innovation theory, DOI, and I brought diffusion of innovation theory for this discussion because automation is all about innovation. Theory of reason action has three sub theories, which is theory of interpersonal behavior, TIB, theory of planned behavior, TBP, and technology acceptance model. And I'm going to briefly walk you through all these five theories in slides to follow. If you like to read the details of these theories, reading one is all about a summary of these theories here. Okay, so let's move on and look at what is theory of reasoned action by Fishbein and Asgen 1967. So the model you can see on the top, theory talks about attitude towards act or behavior. Subjective norms in an organization will influence the behavioral intention of technology use, which will have an impact on use behavior. So theory states that human behavior is predicted and explained through three main cognitive components. Point to note here is that these all theories are very much relevant and driven from the field of psychology. So therefore you will come across a lot of discussion and a lot of points about from human behavior and human cognition. So the first cognitive component is attitude. Unfavorableness or favorableness of person's feeling for a behavior is the first attitude, right? How do we feel about a technology? How do we feel about a tool? How do we feel about jobs? How do we feel about our company, right? Are we favorable or unfavorable? The second element is social norm, is also called the subjective norms, right? Which are social influences. For example, sometimes we adopt because of peer pressure. Sometimes we adopt because of corporate policies, right? And the third cognitive component is intention, which is the outcome variable, which shows the individual decision to do or not to do, or follow or not to follow a particular behavior, right? So the human behavior should be volitional, systematic, and rational, right? So human behavior can respond into three elements. Moreover, that three boundaries factors, which are violational control, the intentional stability over time, and measurement of intention in terms of target, time, context, action, and specificity, are defined to test and evaluate the TRA. So some people will adopt early, some people will take late, some people will watch and learn and adopt, some people will show a behavior of more risk taker, etc., etc. Okay, so finally, some methods such as generality, target, action, context, and time horizon, which we discussed in the previous point as well, are established to improve the robustness between corresponding intention and attitude. For example, from a software development domain, you notice that we have methods like pilot implementation or project implementation or plunge implementation. So all of those gradual implementation actually came from theory of reasoned actions. The second theory is theory of informed behavior. Now, so in 1967, the first theory of reasoned action came out, and of course, then people start looking at its pros and cons, and then Harry Triandis, 1977, worked on theory of reasoned action and said, no, there is something we need to add to that, right? So the model classify mainly the human behavior complexity, which are affected by social and emotional factors. So TRA differs from TIB, or theory of informed behavior, in the sense that TRA interest in accounting for the most variance with the fewest variables, whereas TIB, which we'll discuss, we are discussing now, interest in accounting for the most variance in total, because even a small amount of variance may be socially important. If the behavior in question is critical, then it is important. Okay, so it contains all aspects of the previous theory, right? But it also adds habits, facilitating conditions, and effects in order to improve the prediction power. So if you look at the model here, we have the effect, the social factors remain, and perceived consequence on my productivity or performance will lead to intention, and habit will have an impact on effect of the technology, and also have an impact on behavior. So for example, habitual habits plays a major role in technology adoption. Facilitating conditions are the support, the monetary incentives, etc., etc. Right. So the concept of social factors, which is similar to the subjective norm constructs in TRA, contains roles, norms, and self-concept. Right. So what is my role in a project? What is the organizational culture, and how do I perceive myself a particular technology? So in general, the theory of informed behavior, an individual is neither fully deliberatively or nor fully automatic, further, right, neither fully autonomous or nor entirely social. So each individual is different, and we need to understand individual behaviors, and that was the focus of theory of informed behavior. Okay, so let's unpack this particular point a little bit more, right? So it has different levels. So in the first level, personal belief, attitude, and social factors, which is the first level, you can see affect social norm and perceived consequences, right? Is shaped by personal characteristics and previous experiences. So for example, if I have previously experienced an automation project was not very successful or was not as good as I was expecting, then I always created some prejudice against a new automation project, which will be difficult to overcome. All right, and that will drive my behavior because I'm skeptical about that particular technology. The second level deliberates the effects, right? Cognition and social determinants, plus the personal normative behaviors, right? The habit, intentions, and facilitated conditions. In the third level, the possibility of performing a specific behavior is predicted by behavioral intentions, situational conditions. So, for example, it doesn't matter how negatively I feel, but there is a law which requires me to use a particular technology, right? So TIB disadvantage is this can be quite complex because you're looking at individual behavior and not a group behavior, and a lack of parsimony compared to TRA, right? Isn't it? This also is not providing simple procedures for operational definition of the variables which are presented on this model here. Okay, so the next in our information system theory for adoption is theory of planned behavior, or commonly known as TBP, by Ajik Ezjan in 1985. um, carefully look at. So we start with 1967, then 1977, and then Esjan worked on the theory and said, okay, so there are few issues with theory of informed behavior and TRA as well. So what Esjan said that it added a new component called perceived behavioral control. This guy, right? Let me show you. Laser pointer. This guy, perceived behavioral control, and theory of planned perceived behavioral control is determined by the availability of resources, opportunities, skills, as well as perceived significance of those resources, opportunities, and skills to achieve outcomes. So you notice that behavioral control is an outcome of resources, future possibility for growth, and the skills provided through different programs of training and development. So both tech theory of planned behavior and theory of reason action assume that person's behavioral intentions, let's commonly call it BI, not as business intelligence, is affecting individuals' behavior. TBP is using perceived behavioral control for individual action which are not under violational control. And that's why theory of planned behavior was considered to be a much better theory than TRA and TIB. By adding the perceived behavioral control, not only realistic limitation is composed, but also self-efficacy type factors is achieved for individual norms as well. Moreover, perceived behavior control has the direct influence on actual behavior as well as the indirect effect through the behavioral intentions on a group behavior as well. So, the theory of planned behavior has three main factors that affects the behavioral intention that include perceived behavior control, subjective norms, and of course behavioral attitude. However, there are two problems with this model as well. First, one's attitude towards information technology will not be largely relevant if a computer system is not accessible. That's issue number one. If I have never experienced, I've never accessed, then it's difficult to judge. Second, the receive theory of planned behavior, the revised theory of planned behavior may be viewed as the more suitable theoretical framework which is influence the degree of individual voluntarily association, right, and for technology behavior. Okay, let me get rid of this guy. Okay, next is technology acceptance model by Davis in 1999 and Venkatesh and Davis in 2000 is one of the most cited theory in information system. I think it has over 100,000 citations to date. Yeah, it's around that much. So theory talks about a different perspective. It talks about technology acceptance in organizations. So TAM, or technology acceptance model, explains the motivation of users by three factors. First, perceived usefulness, how I as an individual perceive the usefulness of the technology. Second, perceived ease of use, which is my understanding of how easy it is to use, right? So it locks to complexity of technology. And the third element is attitude towards use. If I start using a technology, what will be my focus, right? So not only behavioral intention would be contained in technology acceptance model, but also two chief beliefs like perceived usefulness and ease of use have considerable impact on the attitude of behavior, right? So these elements can be determined as an unfavorableness and favorableness towards the system, right? So if you look at the model, we have external variables which are contextual variable. So this model actually includes contextual variable, which are very important, which was the weakness in the previous models. It it states that external variable have influence on perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use of technology, and perceived ease of use also influence the perceived usefulness of a system or a technology. And perceived usefulness together with perceived ease of use will dominate and determine attitude towards using a technology. Perceived usefulness and attitude towards using a technology will dominate or determine the behavioral intention to use, favorableness or unfavorableness. And this favorableness or unfavorableness towards technology will actually determine how much a technology is being used, right, by the end user. So we discuss about the external variables like user training, system characteristics, user participation in design and implementation process natures are considered in technology acceptance model. And this is an important point because if you look at the current development, software development methodologies like Agile and DSDM, they heavily are focused on towards user participation, joint application development, and of course the implementation of joint implementation of the project, which are pretty much dominant concept in automation projects as well, right? Okay, so moving on, TAM, of course, as I said, is one of the most widely cited model in the field of technology acceptance, and we still use technology acceptance model, right, to date. Okay, so it also has limitation, right, because TAM ignores the social influence in if you notice, so we don't account for unless and so there's of course a revised model called UT80, which I'm not discussing it here, which tries to bring the social influence on adoption of technology to improve the technology acceptance model. But in its original form, it is limited because of not including the social influences. Okay, beyond the workplace as well. So the last theory in our technology adoption is theory of diffusion of innovation theory by Rogers, 1995. DOI, as it commonly known, is a very robust theory. You will see the diffusion of innovation theory examples in marketing and in operations and of course in technology. So Rogers explained that he examines the diversity of innovations by introducing 4 factors which influence the spread of a new idea. First, the time where the innovation is introduced, the channels of communication used to introduce an innovation, innovation itself, right, or subjective now, right, or social systems in this case. So DOI not only has been used at a both organization and individual levels, but it also offers a theoretical foundation to discuss adoption at a global level, at an organization beyond organizational level. That's why you so notice that it's very robust. It integrates 3 major components. The first is adopter characteristics that will include 5 categories. Early adopters, people who are risk takers and go for the technology as soon as it's introduced. Innovators, the next generation, which will learn from the adopters and then move into use of technology. Laggard, who will be risk averse, right, and will look at carefully the technology outcomes and then adopt. Late majority, who will wait and listen and watch, and then finally early majority. The characteristics of innovation is the second component, which consists of again 5 main constructs: relative advantage of innovation, compatibility of innovation, complexity of innovation, and trialability of innovation, and finally the observability of innovation. That these 5 factors will affect and act as an effective factor for any innovation acceptance. And the third major component is innovation decision process that consists of again 5 steps of innovation decision acceptance. The first is confirmation, second steps is knowledge, and the third step is implementation method. The fourth is decision itself, and finally persuasion, right, which is, you can say, is mostly subjective norms. So diffusion of innovation theory focuses on the system characteristics, organizational attributes, and environmental aspects, and less it has less power in explanatory and less practical for prediction of outcome compared to other adoption models, right? Because it's more like a categorization model, right? So, yeah, right. So if you look at the model itself, we have knowledge. So you notice that the characteristics of decision making unit will have socio-economic characteristics, personality variables, and communication behavior. The persuasion consists of the five elements such as relative advantage, compatibility, complexity, trialability, and observability will have persuasion impact. The decision consists of adoption and rejection. So if it adoption, we will have continued adoption. If we have rejection, we will have discontinuance, right? And continued rejection. And of course, there are possibilities that some people will adopt, and based on the experience, they might discontinue, and some people who rejected might later become late adopters, right? And that, of course, will result into these five categories. So what Roger says that innovators are usually 2.5% who innovate, right? So they adopt when innovation is introduced. So these people are the one who always try to go for something new. The early adopters are around about 13.5%. These things can change based on country or based on your context. So the second categories of adopters are the one who adopt when they perceive information is beneficial to them. The third category, which is the large one, is 34%, right, in a normal distributed data, is they adopt when they perceive productivity improvements of innovation. When they see outcomes, they started to adopt. The fourth category is late majority. They will adopt when they receive extensive help and support. And finally, the technology laggards are the one who adopt when they are forced to or have to choose, right, a particular technology. Now, this model is important because think of yourself as a automation project manager. You will analyze the organization's as employee, its policies and procedures and their behaviors. And if we can categorize that what percentage of people will be innovators and early adopters, right? We design our automation strategies according to the first 16% of the organizational uh, uh, staff. So the proof of concepts, right, will come handy in stages, right? These two stages, right? Okay, excuse me. Then outcomes, right, will help the 24% of majority in organizations to follow us, right? So when we start showing the results of our automation projects, this is the time when the 34% majority also joins the bandwagon. And of course, the remaining 34, right, will be the one who will need extensive programs of training and development, technology support, hands-on, on-the-job kind of support, right, etc., etc. So you already cover almost about 84% of the organizational strength, right, or organizational staff strength in your project. Okay, and of course the last one we have to use policies and procedures. And when I talk about in my tutorial, I'm using this case study from a developing country for automation. I'll give you the example of what actually happened in that. All right, so the orange line shows the adoption rate. So if you notice that as soon as we reach to almost about 50% of our innovators, early adopters, and early majority, the adoption rate started to climb dramatically. Okay, so that was the first section of module 4.1. I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to start the next topic, which is patterns of successful adoption journey. And I'm going to discuss a model by Stoher on automation adoption in detail. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next section. Bye bye.